The following video has been created without the use of AI. Please support your human content creators by liking the video and commenting something down below. Subscribing is optional. Now please, enjoy the show. Sebastian was reading his document again and again. He was reading through it, as something still wasn't adding up. It happened the first time when his scrambler had malfunctioned. For about 5 minutes, Ermshade knew exactly where he was, but aside from that, something else was happening in his brain. He was hearing things that weren't there. A beautiful female voice, angel-like, that was singing. Granted, it wasn't singing. She just went, la 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 la. It was strange and creepy. It only happened when the scrambler was off, and he wanted to figure out if Ermshade did something else to him. Angrily, he crumbled up the page, throwing it behind himself, only to realize he probably shouldn't do that. Annoyed with himself, he fixed the paper and returned it to his folder. He then took the scrambler off his back, making a circle with his tail, placing it in the middle. The thing prevented Ermshade's butchers from finding him, and was invaluable to his survival. With no lead to what was happening with him, though, it being off was the only way of telling if something was wrong. What if the voice was slowly killing him? But because the scrambler made him unaware of it, he couldn't fight it. Sebastian partly wished the thing never malfunctioned. He preferred to just suddenly be dead over it. Knowing something was wrong, but unsure what it was and how to deal with it, made it so much worse. He tapped his left hand on the machine and thought, rolled his eyes and shut it off. Immediately his heartbeat increased, knowing he was right now in severe danger. But thankfully, it didn't take long for the singing to return. A mere hum. Singular. La. As it kept going, he began following the noise. But even though it sounded as if it was right there, it always was out of reach. Behind him, to his left, to his right. Always sounded as if it came out of a different room. Sebastian was getting angry. With the voice, which seemed to react to him, as the lalas became more unnoticeably slower, as if trying to lull him into inaction. Urge him to calm down, or perhaps even sleep. He stopped, standing there, his teeth crunching in thought, and his eyes narrowed. His teeth crunching in thought, yes, the teeth crunching, it was louder than the sound, louder than the singing. Wait, was it coming from his head? Inhaling quickly, he turned around, returning to the safe room with the scrambler. Here he grabbed a hand mirror and began staring into his face, unblinking. Even as the corners of his eyes began to build up liquid, trying to force him to blink. His teeth crunched hard again. No result. And grunting, Sebastian began to shake his head. Until then finally, for a moment, something passed from behind his third eye. Sebastian shook in horror and turned to the scrambler again. Immediately, the singing stopped upon turning it on. His heart was racing as he pushed back against the wall. He was infected with something that made noises when the scrambler was off. Since when? Probably since the surgery, perhaps. The thing's egg only hatched recently, most likely. And it was in his head. What was it feeding on? Why did it shut up with the scrambler? Shaking his head, he reached for his pockets, taking out his folder, going through the pages again, but nothing. The documents of the anomalies he let go, as well as the ones that were still in containment, none of them were a match. Sure, there were parasitic ones, but none of them sung to their victims. Well, he already turned the things... Well, he already turned the stupid thing off twice, he thought. Urban knew exactly where he was right now, even with the scrambler on. So Sebastian just grumbled and opened up his laptop. It only took him 30 minutes of trying to regain access to Urban Shade's server farm. He just needed to make sure his crawler remained hidden by the painter as well as Urban Shade. Nifty little program that sifted through their systems for anomalies that were off-site. He told the program what exactly he was looking for, and with the speed of light the thing was now going through the uploaded files. With about 12 matches that were quickly downloaded before he killed the program again. 12 was still less than the hundreds of creatures contained by Urban Shade, so that was the best thing he had on hand now. And so he decided to read through them like literature, as uncomfortable as they made him. There were pictures and rather descriptive experiment logs and creative ideas how to use these parasites that, quite frankly, made Sebastian want to retch. But there was one, X3232, that made him narrow his eyes. X3232, codename Song by the River. A species of invasive parasitic insect, taking on the appearance of tiny octopus paralarvae, just big enough to be visible by the naked eye, native around the Shiblup crater in Mexico. Native around the Shishilub crater in Mexico. The crater created by the meteoroid that killed the dinosaurs. It was theorized these creatures arrived via the meteoroid, and over millions of years managed to adapt to life on Earth. They primarily infected sea life, but preferred more sentient species. An infected expendable reported hearing music while awake, and vivid, albeit pleasant dreams that were unable to remember it when awake. Which was fitting with the singing being very calming. It was trying to get them to sleep. X3232 was considered an impossibly to contain anomaly, but its existence to the wider world was to be kept under wraps for use by Urban Shade. So far there were no casualties. If anything, infection seemed to lead to a decrease in aggressive behavior by infected expendables. So perhaps it was a good anomaly? Sebastian thought for a moment. There was a very low chance that the little intruder could be removed by non-anomalous means. Problem was, the entire stock of X3232 was located in a reservoir on Site 005, which was located on the surface in Brazil. The only place where he could get a vaccine against this thing. Sebastian's eyes narrowed in thought. Perhaps he was infected during the surgery on purpose? The only good thing about the creature was that while they swam around someone's head, they fed entirely on blood. They weren't deadly. Still, the thought of some small cephalopod insect that was poking around in his eye was quite disgusting to him. And with this feeling, he realized he already spent too much time here. Since he turned off the scrambler for just a bit, he still needed to leave and set up shop deeper in the Urban Shade facility. And so the saboteur took all day to find a proper spot, a place where things were safe enough. No void mass hiding, no cameras or turrets the painter had infected with his AI. It was kinda perfect. Sebastian sighed, exhausted, lying down on his mattress. The scrambler was buzzing in the corner of the room. Well, it was cozy. As cozy as a laboratory got, at least. White rubber-covered floor, couple shelves of science equipment that probably would fetch a good penny in a flea market. And double-reinforced observation windows showing the hallway through which he had come in. On the wall to his right was an empty wall-dweller hole. The interdimensional monsters probably wanted to make this. The anomalous creature probably wanted to make this a hunting spot, but since nothing came by, he probably left upon getting hungry. Which was good for Sebastian. Empty hole-dweller holes were a good deterrent for others, as they quite frankly screamed, "I was here and I died or starved, please leave, don't stay here." Oh well. And soon, despite the day being as because the day was as exhausting as it got, Sebastian slipped off to sleep. But his busy day wasn't over just yet. As today, you had finally realized that the thing you inhabited was in fact sentient. It could hear you. It wasn't just a source for food, a potential companion. Oh, how happy that made you. Excited you had swam somersaults in your lovely host's eye. And realizing your host had gone to sleep, you made it your duty to make them feel comfortable, whatever gender they were. So using your tiny appendages, you slipped through a hole you tore in their eyeball. The opening was so small it would be fixed by your host's body in probably an hour or so you weren't concerned with permanent damage. Making your way into their skull. And there it was, his delicious, large, pulsating brain. Excited, you made a little twirl before attaching yourself to it, injecting them with what you would call affection, though the Ermshade scientists called it brain rot. The tiny droplet of poison was already enough, and was the cause of a rather vivid yet pleasant dream that you, X3232, had direct influence over. And so you closed your tiny eyes and joined your host in his dreams, as your tiny mandibles were buried in his brain. The dream Sebastian had until this point was forgotten. Almost immediately, he awoke in a different one. Lying on something soft, while something else was shining into his face. Confused, he opened his eyes, staring up at the sun. He blinked and sighed, raising his hand to shield his eyes from it, only to notice pink flesh. Immediately, Sebastian was on edge. He was human again? Pfft, yeah, right, he thought. Though he still allowed himself to enjoy the sun just a tiny bit. He hasn't seen it in years, after all. He knew it wasn't real, and he knew this was a dream. Slowly, Sebastian stood up. He audibly whoaed. It's been so long since he stood on his feet. It felt weird standing. There was so much weight on these tiny souls, and yet they kept him steady. One just doesn't appreciate proper legs until they're gone, he thought. The man found himself on soft, tender grass, wearing only simple white underpants. Though he didn't feel any shame, this was a dream after all. Just a few meters before him stretched a long, gentle river, cutting straight through the meadow, so long it went past the horizon. Slowly, Sebastian walked towards it. It appeared pristine, clear, a thin layer of gravel below the surface. He cupped both hands and splashed his face. It was cold and refreshing, but it didn't have the desired effect of waking him up. And so he just knelt there for a moment until the water cleared enough to show his reflection. "Hey, handsome, haven't seen you in a while," he said, smirking. He said to his mirror image. It was then, however, he heard it to his right. It wasn't far. The singing. But this time it felt reachable. He tried to raise his guard, but he felt incapable of doing so, as if this dream world refused any form of aggression. Sebastian tried to resist it, but he couldn't. And the urge to follow this heavenly voice was simply too strong. Your naked feet tiptoed through the soft grass, your arms spread out, loving the air. You loved your host. He gave you such a beautiful body, and it was functional too. In Sebastian's dream, you had the appearance of a beautiful woman. You're tall with perfect ivory skin and hip-long blonde hair that was groomed to perfection into a singular long pigtail with white flowers gently woven into it. Your face was soft with high cheekbones, shiny gold-colored eyes, and white omnivore teeth, and knife-shaped ears that adorably twitched at any unexpected sound. You're dressed in a very revealing flowy white dress that was practically translucent against the sunlight, revealing your figure as a very appealing and sinful silhouette. So your host was a little pervert. Not that you minded, though. Your hands were delicate, soft, and there were no wrinkles anywhere on your body. No moles, not even freckles. A sudden sharp whistle, however, completely made you freeze and turn around. Oh, and there he stood, your host, in a different form. Excited, you clapped your hands. He was handsome, or well, at least your body told you that he was. Really, you had no concept of what was handsome or ugly until you were given this form. Though as you approached him, he looked at you with narrowed eyes, which caught you off guard. Why wasn't your host happy to see you? Are you... Sebastian pointed at his head with his thumb. You know that thing? You nodded happily. Right. What's wrong, my beloved host? You asked. Isn't this the most joyful of days? Joyful? He huffed. I finally get to meet you. You clapped your hands, and you took his, making him blush and avert his gaze. I have been so worried that I'd been born in an unsuitable environment, that I would die of boredom, destined to only feed and eventually pass, but you're a perfect specimen of your species. I wouldn't say that. It was difficult to resist that ridiculous body of yours. And being called a perfect specimen was also quite unique and unexpected, but he didn't mind it.
Though I must say, you don't look anything like you do when awake. What's up with that?
His expression darkened a little. I don't really want to talk about it. Though after a moment of silence, he just had to ask. So, what the fuck are you?
You tilted your head questioningly.
Some brain-eating parasite, or, more importantly, how do you know things? How can you talk?
You blinked and then chuckled. I know things, language and all that, from you, my beloved host.
You rubbed your face against his, causing him to grunt in pleasure. God, your skin was so freaking soft.
The definition of words, the tongue I speak, even my appearance is solely based on what you perceive as just right.
Right.
Coyly you smiled. Though I suppose I don't know exactly what I am. I hatched from a tiny egg, and I've been swimming around inside you for a very long time.
He shuddered unnoticeably.
You don't know it, but you fed me. Gave me life, shelter.
Your face came closer to his, your big eyes staring down at him. They were filled with tears of joy as they wallowed in the sunlight. He looked up at you. You weren't much taller than him, but enough for him to have his heartbeat be quicker. Though it was true. In reality, you were a somewhat sentient little thing, with no knowledge of the world outside your host. Capable of emotions, yes, but higher thought wasn't your strong suit. All your actions were reactions out of instinct. And were your instincts telling you to be devoted to him? Were your instincts that had told you he was sentient? And it were your natural instincts that made you poison his brain to be with him? Perhaps this was it, huh? That was all that there was. Urbanshade probably was just thinking too much. What was written about your biology again? Sebastian went deep into thought. It was hard to think about the real world while he was practically naked in front of such a bombshell. X3232 reproduced asexually. They produced fertilized eggs automatically upon reaching maturity. The offspring contained a mixture of their DNA as well as their hosts. Or to express it in a simpler way, you fertilized your eggs using his blood. They naturally were excreted via a visit to the toilet. He thought for a moment. So, he was a little uncomfortable asking, have you, laid eggs yet? You nodded, as if that was the most normal thing in the world. And relieved, he sighed. Okay, at least you were what your species would call, or consider, 18. So, what do you, want? Your arms wrapped around his head and you pressed him face first into your chest.
All I want is to be suitable, a suitable guest for you, my host.
He couldn't help but smile. Well, you were doing a very good job at that. His eyes rolled back out of pure joy. God, your womanly smell was making him go crazy. Perhaps calling you a parasite wasn't such an accurate descriptor. This felt a little more symbiotic. Well, you got a little dream girlfriend, and you got food and shelter. Though then again, he thought for a moment. In a way, he could see more harm than good coming from your kind's existence. He imagined millions of men rather having X3232 inserted into them instead of just finding a real girlfriend and reproducing normally. A cold shower washed over him. Shit. Considering that, you could end mankind through giving comfort alone. Now that was scary. But man, was this good comfort. Bro, he said, still pressed against your chest, and you gently pulled him off of you so he could talk. His face was flushed and he was smirking. Do you wanna, He smirked and winked and clicked with his tongue. You blinked, tilting your head questioningly, but then,
Oh,
you snickered.
you wish to fornicate with me, host. I'm honored.
You purred, your hands slipping around the top of your dress, pulling it aside to reveal your bare chest.
I must say, I expect you to request it much sooner. You must have a strong will, my beloved host.
His eyes widened as you boldly grabbed his groin, kneading it delightfully, sinfully.
Excited already, aren't we?
You purred. You placed your head onto his shoulder and whispered,
Don't worry, my beloved host.
right into his ear.
Since my knowledge is based on the things that you know.
Your hand slipped past the rubber of his underpants, grabbing a fistful of him.
I know exactly what you like.
Your thumb brushed over a place that he especially enjoyed.
But if you have any requests, feel free to tell me. I want you to feel as good as I am grateful that you gave me the life I have.
Hey, you watched the video until the very end. That's very kind of you. But before I say goodbye, I have to shout out all of my lovely channel members, especially my high-ranking darling stewards, who get a members-only video every month. Join the tier for just $4.99. Anyways, we have Nicolai Hatcher, Maxi Cat, Alison Watkins, Bella Mare, Mystic Jade 111, Giovanna Moretti, Twilight Mia, Angry Boxman, Hella, Anonymous Weep, and Nicodemus D. Thank you for supporting me. Also, thank you to everybody else who is supporting me. You are keeping me alive.